Peace and love, y'all. It is Garden of Hearts. This is episode 12 with Michael the Starseed, my co host,
Rochelle.
Rochelle.
Hello.
And this episode, we have Lawrence C. Harris coming from Philly. And this is a individual who is neurodivergent. He's a young youth speaker, and he has used his experience in order to be a transformative, positive influence on other people. So let's start from the root. What started you on this path?
Well, the thing that started me on my path, we'd have to go back to when I was 12 years old. And I'm sitting on this black couch. It's my little sister's birthday. So my mom's called my phone because she wants to talk to my sister. Now, we have my mom's house, and then you have my dad's house. I'm sitting at my dad's house, and he sees my mom's calling me. His wife, who was very vindictive, said, "Are you going to let him talk to her in my house?" And I guess as like a power trip kind of thing, he goes and punches me in my left eye to, I guess, assert that he's in control. The first time, I thought that he's just mad. Maybe he's frustrated because I'm 12 years old. I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm in complete shock. But then he does it again. And it was like in this moment, a switch goes off. And I realized that I have to make my whole life about keeping my younger siblings safe from him, even though I myself am a child. And this led to years of just being in this dark space where it felt as if I was completely powerless and I could do nothing to give back to others or to myself. And I got to a point where I just stopped caring. And I finally stood up to him. And I told him that one moment you're telling me to go upstairs and get my coat, the next you're telling me to come downstairs and leave because it was time for church on this day. And I could just see his face twisting with this indescribable anger. We go to church, and he told my mom, who's there to watch my sister's talent show, keep him. He's your problem now. And I had got disowned in front of a church. The preacher's out there, the whole congregation trying to figure out what's going on. And as his car is driving off, it's as if a part of me thinks it's going to turn around and come back, but it never does. And through years of therapy and journaling and meditation, I came to realize that my past doesn't have to define me. Even though I was clinically diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and autism and anxiety and all of this stuff. Not as a buzzword, but clinical paperwork saying he got this, all because of that. But I learned how to go within myself and heal that and overcome that and realize that if I can do it, so can other people. And I started looking around and I noticed so many people are hurting in silence. They don't want to speak up about it, or they don't even know the words to describe it. So I took what I learned the hard way and began making YouTube videos, TikTok, just doing whatever I could to let people know who were in my position that this doesn't have to be the rest of your life. And that's what started the entire idea of speaking. I ended up meeting public speakers and I just admired their confidence to go up there and share their stories, about maybe they went to prison or they lost a family member or they were a victim of gun violence or just everyone had been through something. And I wanted to share my story to let people know that you're not the only one. And whatever you're going through, you can get through it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. In that, I see where the resilience comes from in an authentic way. And I was going to ask about, like, why is it specifically with youth? And that I kind of see that in the experience in and of itself. Because immediately when you had that traumatic experience, you immediately began to think of your protector role to your younger siblings. So that is immediately like the essence that was carried into that role of youth empowerment of like, look, the people who are behind me, the people who are further back on this path, like I'm going through these experiences so that I can allow them to not have to go through that same thing, or they feel like they can have an older brother or a guiding individual through that, and I find that admirable. So when you talk about your healing and transformation, I'd love to get into that a little bit more, like the more like details on like the different phases of that, like earlier on when was it an immediate process in the sense of like you knew that this is something to heal from? Or was there external experiences that gave feedback where you're like, okay, there's something that has to change? Was it someone else coming to you first?
It was a mix of both because over a gradual period of about 3 years, that's where I started to realize that I already knew this is a problem. I already knew that it's not normal to randomly wake up paranoid. That's not normal. But because I put so much of my focus on making sure my siblings were all right, I had to neglect myself in order to make sure they were okay. Because if I admitted that I wasn't, I couldn't be there for them in the same level. It was kind of trying to preserve them at the cost of myself. And with therapy, we would kind of just talk it out. Like talking out, like, okay, well, why do I feel like this? Why do I think this? What's going on in my life? And trying to find something to be appreciative of. And there was this moment when I was 15 looking into my bathroom mirror. And I just started asking myself why. Like, why did he do what he did? Why didn't anyone try to help me? Why didn't somebody tell me that they cared? Just why? And through that, it opened up this can of worms of you think that because this is what you keep telling yourself. And you're having this internal argument where you start to realize that, yes, the past happened, he did what he did, but I was blinding myself to realizing that, hold up, the entire reason you're in therapy is because your mom cared enough to put you in it. The entire reason why you're here and still alive is because people did check up on you. You just weren't willing to accept it because you were afraid that they were going to hurt you too. And through unpacking that and then getting really honest with myself, I was able to realize that in order to heal from it, you have to admit that it's there. And you have to look at the ugly truth. And you think, it can't get any worse than this. And then you peel back another layer and you're like, oh yeah, that happened too. And then you peel back another layer and you just get to the core. And you have to stop running. Like, in regard to the stages of healing, there was that denial, then there's running from it. Like, you're trying to outrun the truth. As if to say that your own mind won't catch up to you. Then you gotta stop and look at it. And you have to admit that it's there. Then you have to not go back to it, but you have to learn to integrate with it. And in integrating with it, you start to realize that that fear, that paranoia, that worry, it's natural. It's your brain trying to keep you alive because it thinks that you're still there. But in order to fix it, you have to, first of all, acknowledge it's there, and then take the steps. And those steps can look different for everybody. For me, it was journaling. I had to write out everything. I had to physically write it out and then read it back to myself and say, is this valid though? Are all these thoughts you're having, is this true? And you realize so much about yourself through it. You know, going to the gym, having to take that anger and put it into something productive. Meditation and just being present right here, right now. You have that thought of you're still that 12-year-old on that couch and you have to just take a deep breath and realize, no, you're not. It's years later. You are fine. Your brain just thinks that you're about to die. So let's take a deep breath and realize we are fine.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So in that, you take your story and your experience and the skills that you've taken that fruit from that tree. You share it with others. And a lot of that, it sounds like you're pouring a lot into other people. So my question then is like, what do you do outside of therapy, outside of your work with youth, to make sure that you're okay in the present moment, like now in 2025?
Yeah, outside of therapy, well, I stopped going to therapy when I was around, I believe, 17. Because the goal of therapy is to make you no longer necessarily need it. It's like having a teacher, and the teacher's goal is for you to graduate. Now, the things I do today to remind me that I'm fine are, firstly, you need to have a good support system. Because a lot of people go through something traumatic. They have this idea of, and this is something I learned the hard way too. We start to think, no, it's all on me. I'm all I need. It's me versus the world. That's a very scary place to be. Because when it's only you, it gets real lonely. And when it gets lonely, it gets quiet. And when it gets quiet, all the thought that you've been pushing down, they get really loud. And when they get really loud, it's all you hear. So sometimes you need to have a good support system. Well, not sometimes, all the time. You need a good support system. That could be friends, family, religious groups, community, art club. You just need people who care about you. People who you can feel honest and trust and tell them, I'm having a hard time, and go into detail on it. Other things I do are the gym. It's been proven that getting your body in shape, not even if it was to go become a bodybuilder or something, but just the act of physical exercise, running, swimming, jogging, weightlifting, it creates these chemicals in your brain that makes you happy. It makes you calm. It lowers your feeling of physical pain. That's a big one for me. Reading. Especially reading books on things that you can learn from. One book I read a while back was called The Struggle by Brian Storm. The book talks about the life experience of the author, who actually gave me the book because I met him at a library event. The book is about his life when he used to be a heroin addict. And in reading it, you're going to realize that, hold up, I didn't have it as bad as him. I didn't have it that bad. I wasn't sleeping under bridges. And you start to realize that you have things to be grateful for. Yeah, I didn't have a good father, but I had a really good mom. Yeah, I didn't have a mansion, but I had a home. I had a place to lay my head at night. Yeah, things weren't perfect, but I've got 2 legs, I've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 hands. I have all my fingers. Yeah, I don't make $1 million a year. At the time, I was working at McDonald's. But I had a job. I had something. So a big thing when you're having a hard time is whether that hard time is as small as you're stressed out about a college exam, or it's as big as your house just burnt down. Remind yourself that you're alive. And as long as you're alive, you have a chance. And as long as you have a chance, it's like a slot machine. If you just keep putting coins into it, sooner or later, you're going to win something.
That's beautiful. Great reminders in there. Yeah, no, gratitude and presence. Yeah, definitely the key. And I'm glad you were able to find that, and in your own ways, in the things that, fill you up and resonate. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
There is, when you talked about exercise, I wanna double down on that, especially for autism, because it's something known as bilateral stimulation. This also, when I read about this, it clicked in my mind as a reason why a lot of neurodivergence in the Black community goes under the radar, because bilateral stimulation, to paraphrase it, basically is your nervous system regulation improves the more that you do activities that include your right side and your left side of your body. So like playing piano, basketball, sports, music, this, that, and the third. And when I thought about who are the most notorious neurodivergent minds in the Black community, they tend to be celebrities. Long story short, they tend to be celebrities that we can think of. I don't have to even name them. They're already in your mind. Whether or not they actually get the diagnosis or not, sometimes, at least personally, I have a radar for it where I'm like, this person may not even know. I'm probably not even going to say it, because sometimes that can trigger them in a bad way. If you ask, like, do you got the, you know what I mean? They might not react to it positively the way that you, like, because not everybody is conditioned to view that as a positive thing. They think it's like they blame it on that or something like that. But I say that to say that makes you predisposed towards bilateral stimulation, because you feel the stimmy vibes and it makes you feel good. And then down the line, you just wind up being really talented and really good at something that, because it regulates your nervous system, it makes those other traits that would show up more in a more exacerbated fashion a lot more normalized. So now you're just like, you kind of present in a way that's more neurotypical and perhaps a bit masked, but because it allows you to function in the system, within the system. As long as you function within the system, they won't really come for you, Like, I got good grades, so they didn't really come for me, whereas you're fulfilling your civic duty within the system. So as long as you're doing that, it's not a problem, because in the DSM-5, that's the main reason, that's the main spectrum, that's the main thing that they weigh these conditions on, is how does it affect your daily life? And insinuated in that is like, how much does it impede on your ability to function in society, which we know is currently capitalistic and performative in these things
Yeah.
in nature.
A big thing there is that, growing up, especially in the black community, we find that we kind of shame the most. Okay, I'm going to think of an example of this. A lot of people can relate to this one. When I was a kid, people would tell me I talk white. And I would say, what do you mean by that? Like, can you elaborate on what is talking white? And it pretty much just boiled down to the fact I don't use a lot of slang. I don't speak this way now, but I used to speak in complex English. Because to me, that was just normal. Like, I used to love watching National Geographic, Bill Nye and the Science Guy.
Yeah, same.
I would listen to lectures from like college professors when I was bored. That was my idea of fun. And it led me to getting shamed a lot for just being too smart. Like, people think, oh, are you trying to downplay me? No. If you're 35 and I'm 7, you should know way more than me because I'm 7, you're 35. So the most complex thing I know should be baby stuff to you. Then I realized that most people don't do that. I ended up getting diagnosed because my summer camp counselor noticed, why does he always walk on his toes? Anyone else notice that about this guy? Or when I would talk to people, I would look like slightly behind them because if I don't, my eyes dart around like crazy. And she pretty much just told my mom, I mean this respectfully, but as somebody who knows the signs, you should go get him tested. And she thought, no, he's not autistic. This is what autism is. Like, what you're shown on TV and Sheldon Cooper and people who have zero social skills or the guy who's drooling on himself. This is what autism is. And then you start to realize that, no. If you look throughout history, a lot of the people we still talk about hundreds of years later was definitely autistic. Leonardo da Vinci is a great example of it. The guy was, first of all, he was dyslexic. He also was a mathematician, an astronomer, an inventor. He created the first tank. He figured out the entire human body. Or Michelangelo. So there's a muscle in your arm here that is kind of hard to see it right here, but it's like a little tiny muscle that if you put your fingers a certain way, it flexes. And it only flexes when your fingers are in a certain position. On one of his statues, you can see that muscle flexed because the statue doing that hand position. He figured this out by dissecting corpses. He didn't like doing that, but he was so obsessed with his art that he would go to incredible extents. When he painted the 16th chapel, he only did it because the Pope told him have to, and you can't say no to the Pope. He spent 18 hours a day with his head bent like this, because he had to paint on the ceiling, and then figure out how to not paint on it, but paint into the cement ceiling, because if you paint on it, it'll mold, and he hated painting. He found it to be a less serious art form, but he took his art as a whole so seriously that he would go to these drastic extents. And for me, it's talking. I am an absolute chatterbox. And growing up, when I would learn something, my first thought was, I want to go share this with somebody. I want to tell them about the bats and the birds and the trees and the grass. And hey guys, do you want to know why grass is green? Well, it's actually not. It's just your perception of light. And I would get bullied for that all the time. But through learning to love my own self, I realized, like, hold up. I know there's somebody out in the world who wants to hear what I gotta say. If there's 8 billion people, all I need is 1% of them. If I can get 1% of 8 billion people to listen to me, that's tens of millions of people. So that's when, instead of me telling all this stuff to my family and people who obviously didn't want to hear it, I just started walking down the street recording TikToks. I started my YouTube channel. I would only have like 10 views, but I'm like, that's 10 people who decided they want to click on my video. Thank you.
There's 2 things that I want to pull from that and discuss. So the first thing, when you talked about some of these historical figures that were very clearly autistic, it makes me think the reference points that we have for them tend to be, long story short, they tend to be white.
Yeah, I mean,
in that there's
black people, our history wasn't, really taken seriously or recorded, or it was stolen, and then they said, "Oh no, we invented jazz music." No, you
Right.
didn't.
And what it made me think about is that obviously like neurodivergence come in all shapes and forms. So it's not like there wasn't other neurodivergent people out there, or even neurodivergent people who had the ability to like reach those heights. It just makes me want to get into your perspective on like the socio-cultural nuance on who gets to fully express the highest form of their autism and reach that self-actualization, and people actually appreciate it.
Yeah.
And like,
And I
how can
feel
we
like
cultivate that?
a big part of it too is, first of all, we have to get past the notion that, well, we have to admit the fact that the general idea of autism is based upon white young boys, because that's who it was studied in. And the DSM-5, even though it tries to be all inclusive, the root study was white young boys. It didn't include women, so a lot of women are undiagnosed autists because the symptoms tend to manifest differently for them. And then, you look at cultural nuances, like in the black community. If all your options tend to be basketball, music, or some form of art, you're going to be drawn into that. The ones who are really good at it, people just think, oh no, he's just talented at it. Because we all make music, he just happens to be talented at it. Whereas if you have somebody who you have all the options available, and he picked sculpting, that stands out a lot more. And when you look at the fact that typically in most black communities there's lower income relative to white communities, that by definition means there's less different creative outlets that you will have access to. Yeah, that by definition will mean that you have less creative outlets to explore. So it's harder to spot because, first of all, we're often not trained in what the signs are. Like, we might just see a guy who, he just moves his hands when he talks a lot. Maybe he was raised by a black mom, and typically black moms move their hands a lot. Whereas if you saw somebody else who's doing that, and you're like, why is he always moving his fingers like this? It stands out a bit more. Or we assume that the guy who's autistic is a drug addict. Like, it's really messed up. So in reaching the heights, you have to first of all give someone the freedom to express their thing and not shame them for how they are or how they behave. Like, I couldn't tie my shoes until I was like 10 because I didn't have fine motor control. I could barely write because I couldn't move a pen.
There are so many things that you're bringing up that is like mad healing, bro.
Yeah, no, literally.
I couldn't write. I know how to write, but I couldn't physically write in a legible way. Or I couldn't tie my shoes. Or so many things. But what I am good at, I figured out how to use it. I figured out how to develop that, and I got really obsessive about the things I like. Such as speaking, obviously. Everyone who has a vocal cords and isn't mute has the ability to speak. But to be a public speaker, there's so many little nuances in there. Like crowd control, question and answers, body language, tonality, presentation, how you use silence, how you use tones. There's so many little nuances into it. But when we allow ourselves to fully express, that's when you have people like, whether you hate them or love them or regardless of people's feelings about the guy, we all can admit when it comes to music, the old Kanye West was really darn good. Really good at it. And he is one of, I don't know if he's been diagnosed, but we can all take a look at Kanye West in his life, his lifestyle, the way he makes music, the way his mind works if you listen to his old interviews. And we can all say with a pretty good chance the guy's autistic.
For sure.
He's been making music for decades, but once he started making music, it was like he just had that in him. And a lot of black autistic people, we have that in us, but whether by social conditioning or environment or opinions of other people, we don't really get the chance to do it because we get shamed so much for how is this going to look to other people. Like when I started making my videos, when I started speaking, the first people that started hating on me was my family. They was like, why you always in that forest making them videos? Or why this? Or why that? You walking down the street talking into a camera. And I'm like, okay, and?
Right.
Be glad I'm not doing anything illegal.
That part.
Like, be glad that, yeah, I'm a little weird, but I'm not committing no crime. Y'all was in prison when y'all was my age.
Right. No, because that's
Yeah,
facts. The shame is so unnecessary.
it's harsh, but
Yeah.
that was the truth.
Yeah.
A good amount of them were either in prison or were teen parents when they were my age. So it's like, y'all hating on the guy who tried to help, but we glorifying the one who is kicking in doors.
And the internalized shame is a big thing in our community. It's a huge thing in our community. Personally, I have a spiritual perspective around that as well. But before elaborating on that, when we're talking about like the fullest expression of, you know, what we have now come to call autism and our neurodivergent self, the masking aspect, I think, is a huge barrier for us. For like when you're talking about like your stims and things like that, like I've had that experience very young too. It's like, why are you playing with your ear like that, or why are you clicking the pen, or why da da da. And like I still, like, even now, I made a commitment to progressively unmask. Like when I had the realization and whatnot, I was like, okay, these things are stopping me from my own purpose, and it could be as simple as me hiding it. I noticed it even yesterday. Like I'm like around people and whatnot, and I'm like, my hands are in my pocket, and I realized why my hands are in my pocket. There's about like it. I reverse engineered it because you're talking about body language, right? Your hands are in your pocket, your arms are folded. These are closed body language, so it changes your connection with people. And as I learned how to like network and navigate these social spaces, it kind of forced me in a place where I had to inspect my body language, and that's when I started noticing these different nuances of my masking that no one else really picked up on. So my hands being in my pocket, and I realized the reason why my hands are in my pocket is because I be stimming. I don't want somebody to think I'm fidgeting, because if they see my hands moving, they're gonna think, oh, he's fidgeting, he's dubious or something like that.
Yo.
Yeah.
So,
With
like, how has
me,
that been for you with like unmasking?
it's one of the most. It's both one of the most scary and one like such a beautiful thing, because the first aspect of masking. Growing up, we often get taught, just whether you're autistic or not, just black man, black woman in America, you're taught to put on this mask to perform because, you know, we get programmed to think that everybody's out to get us and that our neighbor is secretly going to rob our house. Like as if the guy down the block who's selling t-shirts is secretly an evil villain. So we put on this mask of, I'm not talking to nobody. We put on this like mean mug, even though deep down we want somebody to talk to us, but we're scaring them away. And the only people who don't get scared away by the mean mug are the villains. So by masking ourselves, we only encounter villains because the villains don't care about the mask. And then when you add the layer of autism onto it, it's like, first off, you're mean mugging to try and protect yourself. But now you don't even know how to properly mean mug, because one of the aspects of autism is struggling with social cues and social body language. So for me, it was so challenging to connect to people because I'm so just raw and open and here's who I am, that when I'm on the train and I see somebody and I'm like, I really love your outfit. They're like, and then once they calm down, they realize like, no, I'm not doing anything against you. I'm just not used to people speaking to me. Like, go out in public and you just see people down at their phones. You could see 10 people at a table at a restaurant and they're all on their phone. They're not speaking to each other. They're not enjoying their meal. We don't even laugh anymore. We send 12 laughing emojis, but that's what we actually do.
I literally forgot how to laugh for a second. I was like, wait.
Yeah.
How do I laugh
And the
emoji
problem is that we get so masked in ourselves that we don't even know how to give that connection to people.
Yeah,
But
they're not present in their
we have to
bodies.
connect with ourselves and just give the raw, unfiltered, here it is. You can like me or you can hate me, but at least you know what I am.
Yeah.
And on that note, I do have to go hit the bathroom real quick.
Period. A little intermission.
Yeah.
Intermission.
Yeah, we can edit
pause
that part out.
Yeah, I'll stop the recording right here.
Yeah, I'll be back in like 3 minutes.
Okay. Stretch break. Oh my god.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to edit this, but I'm scared if I press the stop button, it'll stop the whole thing.
Facts.
You know what I mean? So, but then if I press what if I press pause? Okay, I'm back from our little intermission bathroom break.
Yeah. No,
The
we were
last thing
talking
we were
about
talking about.
yeah, the aspect of masking. So
Hmm.
because the only people who don't care about that mask are the villains, our perception of people is just everybody's the self-serving snake.
The
Not
self-affirming
really.
cycle.
Not really. Yeah, there are people out here who are like that, but if you give people the chance, you'd realize there's a lot more good people than there are bad people. And we all have aspects of both. Nobody is 100% perfect, nobody is 100% flawed. But when you learn how to do that inner shadow work and figure out how to use your anger or lust or whatever bad quality you have and instead use it in a constructive way, it's like not only do you stop running from yourself and you stop masking the truth from yourself about yourself, but now you can give people what you really are because you're connected within yourself. I hope that makes sense right there.
It makes 100% sense. I definitely resonate, and it's the same path that I've been experiencing. In that is that the most important principle that I've been operating based off is authenticity, and that's something that you can't fake the funk with it.
Yeah.
It's something that you experience, that you feel it in your body. When a lot of people are trying to get a certain goal, a certain intention across, or a certain thing across, they may not realize that they're approaching it entirely from a disconnected, like, head on your body kind of thing, where it's like it's so much more than just what you're saying. It's so much more than just what you did or didn't do. It's about your entirety from head to toe, and I intend to convey that to the collective also when we talk about like healing modalities, when we talk about psychoanalysis. There's a point in time where we're going to realize that your your thinking faculty, your feeling faculty is more than just your brain up in your cranium. It's your entire head to toe, and it all has information. It all has emotion to it. You know, there's the gut brain, so on and so forth, and all these things have this interactive experience that I believe that neurodivergent people have a higher sensitivity and a higher attunement to these things, and then there's a cause and effect that it manifests down the line as that you reach, you know, these traits that are like there's other underlying things that contribute to this outward manifestation of it. I believe that the weakness of these systems that we use to describe it is that they primarily focus on behavioralism, you know, and it doesn't incorporate that inner aspect of it. The only reason that I finally made that shift to I had misdiagnoses at first. Like, I got diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychotic effects. Then I got diagnosed with bipolar type 2. And then at that point is when I made the realization of, like, I might actually be autistic instead. As I was doing the research, I learned that those are the common misdiagnoses for that. How medicine. Oh, okay. So the only reason why I finally made the shift between I relate to this thing and I was like really into it. I was researching it. I was researching everybody's experiences and I was interacting with it from a disconnected perspective. It was just something that I'm interested in and I really relate to these people and I really care about these people, but like I was disqualifying myself from it. The only time where I made the shift where I was like, oh, this is actually also me, is when I happened upon the YouTube page that's called Special Books for Special Kids.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
Yeah, and it was the autistic people getting interviewed and explaining their own experience and how it felt from the inside out and not the outside in of a diagnosis. And that's when I was like, the switch flipped in my brain where I was able to see the perception differently, because my personal way of navigating these things is very introspective in how I describe it. And when you go to a doctor, they're only going based off of what you tell them. So if I tell them X, Y, and Z, they're just going to utilize their internal lexicon and interface it with what I'm telling them. And then if I tell them some new information, then they'll add that, or so on and so forth. and included in their lexicon isn't only just their college education, but their personal biases, their cultural preset, and all those things. So when we're going through a facet of the same system that is designed to suppress us, to get help and to get support and understanding ourselves, there's a point where it's like you have to have some personal agency in how you're interpreting what they're giving you. Like the diagnosis is low-key not the end of the story. It's like it definitely helps, but even now, for example, when I learned about they're creating this directory of all the autistic people in the country, and they're developing it, they're looking for that to help us, right? It made me realize that this is a fine line that we're walking right now, because not only is there social implications to this being common knowledge, whatever your diagnoses may be. Like if you're a high masking individual, some people might not even, like, they wouldn't even be able to pick up on it until you told them. But there's also economic implications and there's global implications. For example, there's certain countries that your ability to travel to them, in and out of them, is different based on your mental health diagnosis. So the reason why I'm synthesizing these things is because how do we step up in our black community and, like, let's not leave the locus of control within the medicine system, and like how you're doing where it's direct empowerment, like I'm speaking directly to them, and how can we continue to integrate and normalize forms of support and a community that we can flourish in our neurodivergence, or if you're not neurodivergent. Because hypothetically, I can also imagine, like, if you were autistic and like the world was set up in a way that didn't inherently have friction with it, would it even show up? You know what I mean? Like, would you even have to think about it if it was just like you already had the support? You already had people who were like, oh, that's just how they are. If it was already integrated. Glasses is a disability. Your eyes don't function the way that they're supposed to, so you get something added on to support you. But we don't consider everyone with glasses to be a disabled person.
Facts.
Yeah, and then with
You
the
know?
aspect you just mentioned there, with how we need to have that support both within the community as well as not just purely within the medical system. An aspect for me is that the reason why I personally choose not to take any kind of medicine for it is I read the side effects on it. And I know that if I were to get hooked on something, I'm one of those people where I'm just kind of predispositioned to immediately get hooked. So we need to have support, not just in, hey, take this pill, or hey, take this medicine. Even though for some people that is very effective and that works no problem for them, we need to have other things like, okay, here's emotional regulation tactics. Here's ways that you can stim without having to, like, tap your foot very loudly, because you have to go and do college testing, and tapping your foot very loudly is a major inconvenience to people. So having the resources taught to us and having it known, because the resources already are there. They exist, but it's not publicly told about. Unless you ask somebody who already knows, you never find out. Or unless you specifically Googled resources for autistic people in Philadelphia. Then you're going to see, wait, there's a 2-year waiting list. And then you're going to realize that, hold up, the schools, I have to pay for those out of my pocket. And you might be a single parent, 2 kids. You're already paying a mortgage, healthcare bills, phone bills, lights, utility, food, gas, clothes, video games, and all the other, normal stuff. You don't realistically have the money to put your kid into a school specifically beneficial for autistic people. Then we also have to think about how it's often taught that autism is like a spectrum where you're like more or you're less autistic. Whereas it's more like a gigantic wheel where on different parts of the wheel you have things like emotion control, social skills, tactile function, sensitivity to sound, writing ability, communication, and all these other things around it.
Yeah, it's like a stat sheet.
Yeah, it's like you just said, a stat sheet. So understanding that is a very big component of it too. Because when we get too wrapped up into the stereotype, we we think that this person doesn't need help or resources because no, he's functioning. He's pretty normal. He's not drooling on himself. He's not, unfunctionable. But in reality, if we had an understanding of autism when used towards the goal, like when it's used towards a beneficial goal, it is a superpower.
Yes.
Like I've seen people who are ridiculously good at one thing, but if you ask them to do something like do their laundry, it's like moving a mountain to them. So for people like that, if they had a resource such as even just as simple as their family understanding, if we give this guy a piano, he's going to make the best song ever. But he has incredible challenges with doing his laundry. Not making an excuse for him, but
It's just like
offering
me
the
for real.
support and gradually weaning it away so that he's able to do his laundry on a consistent basis. Because there are some people who they just like actually cannot do their laundry on a consistent basis. It is what it is. There's others who they need a bit of help, and then once they develop the skill and the consistency, then you can take that support away and give it to the one who does need it now. So it will be a system that it can easily be implemented, but there will be a lot of nuance to actually pulling it off because the daycare worker needs to be certified in specializing in autism. That means they have to go to college for that or get a degree or pay some sort of program, which means that this daycare worker needs to be paid a higher amount relative to one who isn't specialized because they have to pay off their debt and they have a specialty skill, which means that the autism daycare will naturally cost more than the typical daycare unless you get government funding for it. And if
Right.
you do get government funding for it, who's to say that the one in Boston needs more or less than the one in Philadelphia? And then how
Right.
do you determine the funding? And then how do you, like, there's so many factors that will go into it. But if it can be pulled off, you would be able to create a society where people of all types, all shapes, all colors can thrive because they learned how to use their innate abilities to go out and thrive for themselves and their community. We got a lot of chefs. We have a lot of barbers. We have artists, musicians. But because they're living in a society that shames them for being them, they don't ever tap into their power.
Yeah, there's so many things you said that are so real. I see that very much so in my family because only one of my siblings is actually officially diagnosed with autism. Because, like you said, it's not about more or less, but her needs were made more clearer earlier on, so it was like easier to spot. And literally, my whole life, like the biggest thing where like I'm at now is just like if there was just information, and that was very evident, like growing up to like seeing like everything you're saying, like where it's like money and school support and all that stuff. Like I watched my parents go to meetings and try to fight to get like some type of whether it was within the school that she was in or sent her to a school that again like you said is more tailored to helping people with autism, and it was just always like a back and forth of oh we can't approve of it because she's not autistic enough. Like she's definitely up there, but she doesn't qualify to go to that school. So like no, but then also not being able to give her the support that she needs within the school that she is. And so it's like I look at her and I'm just like, yo, like I wish we had the tools and the resources to be able to like identify again like what your superpower is, so that like it wouldn't have been such a chaotic upbringing. Like there was no sense of peace whatsoever growing up in the house because everyone was confused, everyone's scared. I've never interacted with this before, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, the rest of us are also going through our unrecognizable struggles, and it's like everything was just not in unison. And the simple again piece of understanding would have been more than enough to just be like, okay, like as your sister, as your brother, as your mother, as your father, I see you, I see your needs, blah blah blah, and like I can adjust to that. Now, like I feel like I've been taking it upon myself to, as I've gone on my self discovery journey, like to see like, oh okay, my dad's definitely the sensitive to sound person. That's why he was always so irritated, and that's why it affected this sibling the most because they needed to make a lot of noise. Me to sing loud. I wanted to do this, and then like it was just you're overstimulated. You had a long day at work. Your kids, you don't know what you're doing. Like it's a lot. It's a lot, and literally like just no support. Like no friends who understood. Like no one to co-regulate with. No one to help a parent or like, oh, okay, you take her this day, you blah, blah, whatever. And so that like dream society, that ideal society where like there is understanding and we're able to help. Like, I have faith in it for some reason. I believe in it. I don't know how the logistics will be taken care of, but I do feel like as we are, growing in compassion and empathy, like as people, like again, like not everyone's on the same page, but for those of us who are doing the work and who see what's going on, like I just, it's a dream that I have, and I feel like it's in my head for a reason. So I know that we'll be able to do something one day, and it starts small. Again, it starts local. It starts with that one preschool in that one town. You know what I mean? That was like built up by people who just learned and maybe didn't need to go be certified for millions of dollars in school, but because we are neurodivergent ourselves and we understand that. I also maybe think bartering might play into that at some point too, where it's like, okay, we'll exchange training in this for this and da da da. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we have things like TikTok and social media and
Right.
YouTube, for all the damage it has done, it also has brought a lot of good. Like that channel, Special Books with Special Friends. Things like that. That's out there. So now people who don't have a college education on this stuff, or they didn't read some 50,000 page book, or they aren't therapists, they can go and get information. They can Google things. They can find out. Even though if you Google something like "why do I have a headache," it'll tell you that you have stage 4 cancer. But if you ask the right questions, like, okay, why does my 5-year-old son walk on his toes? It'll say, well, does he also do this? Yes, he does do that. He might be autistic. Most of history, that wasn't a thing. You just either had to fit in or you got left. And then, you have things like TikTok. Even though TikTok has most of the information on there is going to be very watered down and basic because you can only put so much in 1 minute. There are people on there who actually give like very valuable advice on here's 3 ways to handle stress management as an autistic person. Or here are 3 signs that your 10-year-old might be autistic. Things like that. So that ideal society is actually a lot more realistic than we think it is. Because as far as the infrastructure such as schools and camps and things like that, it can be pulled off. We just need the funding.
Yeah.
We have the information. We have the opportunity to make it happen. It's just about the collaboration between, if we can get 50 people to contribute $1,000 each, now we have $50,000 to get a building. Get like a rundown building and fix it up, and that'll be like the community center. And then for as things like training and counseling and certificates, that can come down the line. For right now, we're just a community center.
Yeah.
Because once you start legally adding in things like autism diagnosis, ADHD diagnosis, once legal terms are put into there, that's when certificates are needed.
Right.
But if we just have a community center, it just happens to have a lot of autistic people. By coincidence, that doesn't need certified people. That just means let's have autistic people teach other autistic people how to better function.
Right.
And
You,
then you can easily find them. Like a lot of people who I've met who always seem like a bit off. You get to know them and you realize, like, hold up, this guy is really good at nothing but computer code. He ends up a web developer, or he really likes bugs. The guy who made Nintendo, well, the guy who specifically made Pokemon was autistic, and his special interest was collecting bugs. And he made a video game where you're running around collecting wild animals and battling them with each other. Then
I'm
you
getting
have things
chills.
like
That's amazing.
a lot of movie directors, Quentin Tarantino, or you have like people who are artists and chefs and painters. Just off the top of my head, I wouldn't be surprised if Gordon Ramsay was autistic. Because have you seen how seriously this man takes food?
Very.
yeah, he's very passionate about it.
Like
Yeah.
how mad he will get if your steak is ever so slightly off. Like he put 2 pieces of bread on someone's head and said, "You're an idiot sandwich."
Yeah.
That is not a neurotypical thing to do.
And the way he treats kids is very different too.
Just not even to say they're like these huge pinnacles of success, because Gordon Ramsay, Kanye West, Michelangelo, these are outliers. These are like an outlier group. Most autistic people fall into like that 90% where he's pretty darn good at this, but he's not like some super duper crazy outlier yet. But if we give him the resources and the opportunity, he can thrive and become one of these outliers, and the pool gets bigger, and then you start to realize like it's not that these people have something crazy special about them. It's that they just had the opportunity or the resources to thrive earlier on in life. So because of that, they end up with a thriving community around them, whether they just happen to be born into it or they found it. Like, I'm pretty darn sure that Gordon Ramsay, when he was in culinary school, met other people who were very serious about this. Or people who are, like, obsessed with the gym. They meet other people like that by coincidence. So, a big thing that, people, whether you're autistic or not, can do is figure out what your thing is. What do you like to do? Even if everyone thinks it's weird, if your thing is collecting bugs, there is I can't remember the name for it, but there's a specialist type of biology who only deal with bugs. Or you really love spiders. Like your special interest is spiders or dolphins. You can become a marine biologist. I have a friend who, well, we're not friends anymore, but we used to be, where they were obsessed with ocean life. Like whales, dolphins, fish, sharks. You could show them the fin of a shark, like the most random thing, like the most zoomed in picture of a shark fin, and they can tell you, that's a mako shark. How do you know? Well, you see how the shading on the front part is slightly darker than the shading on this part? Yeah, but I zoomed into the corner of one of its fins, and you can barely tell. Well, that's their special interest.
They're
Or
locked in
some
on it.
people it's fishing or art or whatever. It just find your thing, find people who resonate with you, and it'll make life so much easier.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I agree with that. And that's part of the nuance to unpack with that earlier question about like these figureheads that we're referring to, and they're not different than any of us really, besides having the opportunity to see themselves and then go down the path. So with that, and even what Rochelle, what you were saying earlier, and like our conversation earlier about that aspect, it leads to my question about it is, for young people who are neurodivergent or queer or navigating trauma or trying to find themselves and whatnot, the defining factor between whether or not they figure it out, they get the support and what they need, is somebody who's paying attention to them. Like, in order for someone to be like, well, in order for them to really get diagnosed, somebody has to notice that kid is walking on their toes. Because what I remember is that, like, I walked on my toes, but personally, after I didn't have friends for real in elementary school and stuff like that, I wasn't in clubs. I'd walk home from school, I'd go home, and I'd be in the house by myself for like at least 3 hours because my sister went to a school in a different town and both of my parents were working. So all those, like, I remember those autistic traits, but there was nobody observing me to be like, you're doing autistic shit right now, So in that, I was the only person in the position to like observe that, and it just happened. I'm lucky that it happened at the juncture in my life that it did, because I'm here now, So for other young kids, it's like, how can the adults like us or other adults, how can we show up for these youth in ways that is non-systemic until we get the funding, until we reach a point where now we can do this, until we can reach a point where society has progressed? Because I believe it is going to progress. It's going to happen. But in the meantime, while the mountain is ahead of you, you still have to take steps towards it before you get over to the other side.
No, obviously,
Like, what are those steps that we can take?
like the easiest way we can show up for these people, and I didn't mean to cut you off. It just that triggered my brain immediately. Would be putting the information out there. Not to say that everybody needs to become a motivational speaker, but if you know something that can benefit other people, go make a 5-minute TikTok. You don't need to edit it. You don't need to have any fancy charts. You just need to sit down behind that camera and start talking. You don't even need to be on camera, actually. You can have like an AI-generated video that explains the subject for you. Or you can volunteer at like a summer camp. Or you can provide free resources, like handing out pamphlets. There are people who they stand on the corner all day and they just hand out like little papers like, hey, you want to learn about God today? Or, hey, you want to learn about autism? Let's spread some awareness. There's fundraisers people can donate to. There's GoFundMe's. There are so many things. You can go on Eventbrite, and there's things like autism networking event, autism community event, autism awareness club, parents with autistic children group. So it's out there. We just need to go get it, go be a part of it, and spread awareness. That's the biggest part because it's out there. Nobody knows it is though. Like I mentioned earlier, the resource is there. It's just if nobody knows, nobody can get it. And if the resource is state funded and nobody's using the state funded resource, the state's just going to take it away because why spend money on this if nobody's using it? So it's one of those, we need to use it or we're going to lose it. And when that happens, it's going to come down to people on TikTok and Instagram where anybody can hop on there and act like they know what they're talking about. And unfortunately, if you got two people, one of them got 50,000 followers, the other one got, the 50,000 follower one can say something that is absolutely wrong and people believe it because no, he got 50,000 followers though. The 5,000 follower one can say the most perfect advice ever, like PhD, college educated, perfect advice. And they're like, it's not really that good though. And they're like, I have a PhD on this. The one with 50,000 just went viral a couple of times. So we need to use these resources that are actually good, or it's going to come down to the internet. There is good information out there, don't get me wrong, but there's also a lot of bad information out there. We can notice this in other things too, like dating advice. It's one of the most detrimental things to humanity.
Literally.
There's some good advice, like, hey, go take a shower, put on some cologne, learn how to dress. That's good advice.
Yeah.
But then you got other things which go viral, like the stuff where people saying the most crazy, outlandish statements ever. Like, you need to have a Rolex, and if you don't make $50,000 a month, ain't nobody gonna want you. And if you're not,
you gotta start 3 LLC.
Right.
Or you gotta walk up, you gotta say, I'm a high value man.
Yo,
Yeah.
don't even start.
What? Like that whole high value man thing. The problem with that too is when you tie it in with autism. Because a lot of autistic people grow up not really knowing how to connect, not knowing how to receive and get that love. If they see a video and the guy says you gotta walk up and say this, they're going to do it. Not because they think it's right, but he appears to have what I want. And he's saying that this is what you have to do to get that. So I'm going to go take the advice of the person with the thing that I want. Not realizing that, hold up, he paid that person to be there. And in the moment, it leads to this cycle where once you start taking the bad advice and you start using it, you don't even realize it's bad advice because if he appears to have the relationship, he had the money, he had the successful life, and he said to do this, and my way isn't working, it seems like his way is. So we just need to spread awareness about the fact that autism isn't just drooling on yourself. It's not just Sheldon Cooper or Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, we need representation.
Yeah.
It's we need to have like not only diverse representation, but understanding of the signs. Like when I got diagnosed, one of the first things the lady who did it pointed out was you speak like somebody who has autism. Not in a degrading way, but she started breaking it down to me where because your brain functions a bit differently, your processing of language and connecting ideas function differently as well. So earlier, where I tied it from the resources available to autistic people, to community events, to Eventbrite, to dating advice, that connection there makes sense, but it only makes sense because your brain processes it differently and is able to then articulate the connecting point. So just having the resources and the awareness of the resources and the awareness of we need to use these or we're going to lose them. And if we lose them, we're going to end up with a much worse society because the people who go viral are the ones who say the outrageous stuff. The ones who actually give good value don't really go viral like that. And I say this as somebody who had been on TikTok and social media and YouTube posting consistently for like 3 years straight. And I've had like one video go viral where it got like 1 million. But that's because that video wasn't even me giving advice. It was me just talking about how great I am. That's what the video was. I did mention, yeah, I help other people, but I didn't tell you how I help you. I didn't give you anything to think about. I just gave you something to laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to, as a collective, do a bit more thinking and a bit more unity and understanding that we need to help each other.
We need to be more present.
Yes.
Yeah, I resonate with that whole thing. And it's interesting. It might be the video that you might be referring to. Is it the Big Dog video?
Yes. The funny thing about that is for the first 2 months, the video was just sitting there on like 500 views. And then one lady started sharing it to her friends. And then they start sharing it to their friends. And then I woke up like a week later and it had like 20-something thousand shares on it. I'm like, whoa, okay. And it's a weird feeling because naturally, one of the common things with autism is you kind of get hooked on stuff. Like, we're far more dispositioned to drug addiction because our brain is constantly looking for this new stimulation. And when it doesn't get
repetition and things like that.
It resorts to what can be considered self-destructive. Obsessively playing video games. Nothing necessarily wrong with enjoying a couple games here and there, but 8 hours of it, you got a problem. Nothing wrong with, going out to a party, having fun, but blackout drunk, you got a problem. Or you're doing this every other day, there's a problem there. Not to say a problem with the person, but your brain is just seeking this stimulation, and when it doesn't get it, it kind of goes into like a panic mode because it's so overwhelmed. And if you don't have the awareness of autism or the awareness of what overstimulation or being overwhelmed as an autistic person is, you're not going to know how to properly address it. Because everyone gets frustrated, everyone gets overwhelmed, everyone gets overstimulated. But it's different when you're overstimulated as an autistic person because sometimes the thing overstimulating you might be a light bulb. And you need to change the light bulbs in your house. It might be a certain clothing fabric. And the solution to your problem is stop wearing denim. But you don't know, so you think that you're just naturally an angry person. No, you're just autistic and you don't understand the thing that triggers you.
I've had a lot of experiences like that. And it's one thing that I can say too is that living by example through it has been a beautiful experience because I've allowed other people to reconnect with themselves. At least in how I've seen it in my personal family. So as I began shedding layers of my ego and like layers of myself and my masking that I realized weren't actually me, this is just conditioning and like safety mechanisms to like protect me and like my inner child or like my obvious autistic traits. There was the initial friction of that, right? Where it's like now you're no longer people pleasing, or now you're taking up too much space, or you're this, that, and the third. And then after pushing through that, after a lot of years, then people are like, you know what? Actually, I see that you might have been onto something. I kind of get it now. And an example of that was recently I look at the dinner table, and there's a book about the ADHD brain just there on the book on the table. Like, I didn't buy it. I'm like, somebody got this book. I see my mother. I'm like, did you get this? And she's like, yeah. And long story short is that like after, my journey, like I had for some years, I spent time away from the family. I moved out. I had a spiritual awakening, neurodivergent awakening, this, that, and third. And then I moved back in. And the one person who recognized the growth and the change that I had experienced was my mother. And we had a conversation about that where she said, a lot of people wouldn't have taken that time to do that. They would have done other things. After witnessing that, it inspired me to be more introspective and for me to actually consider. Because I called, I remember like when I had my like realization, I called her on the phone. I'm like, Mom, I think I might be autistic and you too. And she was like, no, because my friend, her son is autistic and he don't speak. And I'm like, a lot of people say that. Check in with this like in a couple of years. Was that because there's the pattern recognition aspect of it. I didn't just immediately say that. It's like there's all the patterns that like click, and then you're like, now I can make this statement. But I've witnessed her watching videos about it, starting to research it more, starting to read about it more, starting to get into it more, change her own perspective towards it, her perspective towards her anxiety. And as I've grown and got more mature with my emotional regulation, I'm able to recognize her experience and not just like my emotional regulation. Moments where it's like if it was like me as a child, it might have felt like oppressive, right? But now as an adult, it's like she's just having anxiety right now, and like it's not the dynamic is nowhere near the same anymore. Where it's like I'm actually in a position to actually help. Where I'm gonna be like, hey, take a big deep breath. This is an anxious moment. Breathe with me, like, and then she'll actually stop, regulate for a moment, and then now we can have a completely different conversation. That door was never open before I left and came back. So I think that is also like the, you know, like when they say hard skills and soft skills in the workforce, that's like the soft effect of this journey that we're all going on, is that some of the impact isn't actually what you're doing, but what it trickles down into other people, seeding, planting that seed for them of like, you know what, you know, maybe I don't have to clench my jaw or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm super excited for.
And a big part of that too is just how through understanding ourselves, we can understand others and we can look at them and go, no, my mom's not acting out. She just is having a little anxious moment, but she doesn't understand it. But I understand it. So I can't get mad at her. She just,
Right.
because you understand them and you understand they don't understand, you don't get mad at it. It's like a kid. If a kid says, why can't I touch the stove? You say, because it'll burn. And they're like, well, how do you know? Because I know. But the kid doesn't know. So it's not to say that we infantilize, whatever that word is, infantilize other people. We just view them as they only know what they know. And I cannot blame you for what you don't know. Because, like your mom said, most people wouldn't have gone inside themselves and realized that. So, there could be aspects that you understand that she doesn't. So you can't really get mad at it. And I found that to be the case in my life too, where a lot of time my family, they'll be having an argument and I'm just there just observing it. And they can perceive it as sometimes they perceive it as, what if he's looking down on us and what if he's not understanding how serious it is? Now I understand how serious it is, but I understand it's not as serious as you think it is. So I'm not going to get emotionally tied up into it. I'll just wait until you guys calm down, and then I'll explain how all of the time you just spent arguing about who's going to do the dishes, we could have done the dishes 5 times.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Just
And a
so
lot of times it don't even be about the dishes. It's about that the pent up energy,
Right.
and this scenario becomes a way to express that.
yeah, and then, like you said, you realize that it's not even really about the dishes. It could have been somebody at school said something to one of you, somebody at work did something, somebody at the grocery store did something. So you're all bringing this anger and frustration to each other that has absolutely zero to do with each other, but you don't understand how to regulate your emotions and how to acknowledge how you feel, whether you're autistic or not. You just don't know how to regulate your emotions. So naturally, you need to take it out somewhere. And it just so come happen that the dishes was a really good excuse. And so you know, I do have to go in 5 minutes because I got another podcast to hop on.
Understood. I was planning my transition also because I have the notes on my phone. So this has been a beautiful episode. If you were to say one last thing from your heart to the soil of the world, you know, to the black boys, the black girls, the neurodivergent kids out there, what would that be?
I would say you're not what the world tells you that you are. Because growing up, you know, as a black man, we're often told that you gotta be a gangster, you gotta be a drug dealer, you gotta be a thug, you gotta be tough, or nobody gonna like you, or they gonna take advantage of you, or you soft, or you this. But the funny thing is that being quote unquote soft and being quote unquote lame is what keeps you out of jail. It's what keeps you from dying early. Because you ever notice that you've never met an old thug? Because they all die. You meet an old lame dude, the dude on the corner who's 75 and he's telling the kids to, you know, pull up their pants. He might seem like, oh, he just he just, oh, he don't know what he's talking about. No, he's trying to tell you to behave in a proper way so that when you go to a job interview, they're going to take you seriously. Because it's already hard enough with like people's preconceived stereotypes and preconceived notions, and even if the person in front of you isn't a diehard racist, if their exposure to black people is rap music, movies, and television, subconsciously they start to think that you're that too. So when you pull up your pants and you button up your shirt and you don't have 15 face tattoos, people are a lot more open and receptive. But the point I'm getting at with you're not what the world tells you that you are is just look throughout history and you're going to realize that you are a part of a lineage of people who have survived incredible ordeals. The MLKs, the Malcolm X's, the Rosa Parks, the Harriet Tubmans, the George Washington Carvers. The guy figured out like 200 different ways to use a peanut. The people who invented, the lady who invented Wi-Fi, that was a black woman. The fire extinguisher, the lighter, so many incredible inventions. You're a part of that. But they won't tell you that. They'll tell you that you gotta become the next Pop Smoke, and you gotta become a gangster, and you gotta be El Chapo, and you gotta be all these things. But no, if you wanna be quote unquote lame and be quote unquote weird, and you wanna go play Dungeons and Dragons, go do it. Go pick up a Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Put down the switches, pick up a book, read it, pull up your pants. Not to say that it's you gotta pretend to be something you're not. No. Respect yourself enough to present yourself in a proper way. So that's my little message on the art right there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lawrence, for coming on to Garden of Hearts episode 12. And to the audience, thank you for listening, and peace and love.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.